Divisive issue. Catholic conservative candidate Rick Santorum tackles immigration. Graceful acceptance. Former President Jimmy Carter calmly shares his faith as his cancer closes in. Fiery death. Trapped in a firestorm, 3 firefighters lose their lives in the line of duty. And brand new lives. 5 albino children from Tanzania get life-changing help from a New York charity. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 20th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. This is your news now. Former President Jimmy Carter says his life is in the hands of God as he faces cancer treatment. Jason Calvi reports from the White House, where Carter served as America's 39th president.
Brian, Carter says he has 4 spots of melanoma on his brain. Today he received his first treatment of radiation. Before that, he spoke about his cancer publicly for the first time.
A small-town peanut farmer who went on to become Georgia's governor and the 39th president of the United States.
But now I feel, that it's in the hands of God, whom I worship, and I'll be prepared for anything that comes.
For now, he says he feels fine. Carter's father, brother, and 2 sisters all died of pancreatic cancer. The former president had a small mass removed from his liver earlier this month. An MRI that day revealed cancer.
I just thought I had a few weeks left. But I was surprisingly at ease. I've had a wonderful life. I've had thousands of friends, and I've had an exciting and adventurous and gratifying existence.
After losing his re-election, Carter delved into humanitarian work through his foundation. He says he's going to cut back his work, something he and his wife Rosalind have long talked about.
For a number of years, Rosa and I have planned on dramatically reducing our work at the Carter Center, but haven't done it yet. We thought about this when I was 80. We thought about it again when I was 85. We thought about it again when I was 90.
President Carter won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002, but he says he's most proud of his marriage.
The best thing I ever did was marrying Rosalind. That's the pinnacle of my life. And we've had 69 years together.
And Carter will celebrate his wife's birthday this weekend. He's also planning to teach Sunday school at their Baptist church. And he says he really hopes he can make it to Nepal this November for a trip with Habitat for Humanity. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the White House. Thank you, Jason. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Immigration policy is beginning to divide the Republican field. Today, a former Senator, Rick Santorum, laid out his plan while criticizing other GOP contenders. Wyatt Goolsby attended that talk here in Washington. He joins us now with the story.
Brian, right now Rick Santorum is down in the polls and he hasn't been getting much attention from mainstream news networks, but he's reminding voters that he's had a hardline approach on immigration long before many of the top GOP contenders.
You have a lot of folks who will come out there and have very sharp elbows and tell you how everything is wrong and tell you why everything is broken. But they have no record to show that they've been able to do any of those things.
The former Pennsylvania senator affirming his track record of getting things done in Washington. Today, Santorum laid out his immigration policy. His plan? Build a wall on the Mexican border and put stricter limits on the number of immigrants. It's similar to Donald Trump's proposal.
They're illegal immigrants. They came over illegally.
Last night, both Trump and Jeb Bush campaigned on immigration during town halls in New Hampshire. Bush criticized Trump's approach, which proposes deporting all 11 million undocumented immigrants out of the U.S.
But hundreds of billions of dollars of cost to implement his plans is not a conservative plan.
Unlike Trump, Santorum stopped short of saying he would deport all illegal immigrants, but he says he would be willing to deport parents who cross the border illegally and give birth to children in the U.S.
We're not separating them arbitrarily. We're separating them because they did something and they put themselves in a position to jeopardize that relationship with their children.
Santorum says immigration is good for the country, but he says the law must be respected. Santorum got a bit more emotional today when he was asked about the recently released videos uncovering Planned Parenthood practices. He's gone farther than most candidates on that issue, saying not only would he defund Planned Parenthood, but he says the organization should be prosecuted and shut down. Brian?
Wyatt, thank you. Well, it's not surprising that GOP frontrunner Donald Trump disagrees with the views of Pope Francis on capitalism. Listen to this exchange with CNN's Chris Cuomo.
The Pope believes that capitalism can be a real avenue to greed. It can be really toxic and corrupt, and he's shaking his finger at you when he says it. What do you say in response to the Pope?
I'd say ISIS wants to get you. You know that ISIS wants to go in and take over the Vatican. You have heard that. You know that's a dream of theirs, to go into Italy.
He talks to you about capitalism? You scare the Pope?
No, I'm going to have to scare the Pope because it's the only thing. There's only one. Look, the Pope, I hope, can only be scared by God.
Is the ceiling open over here right now?
The Pope, I hope, can only be scared by God. But the truth is, you know, if you look at what's going on, they better hope that capitalism works, because it's the only thing we have right now. And it's a great thing when it works properly. In our country, Chris, it has not been working properly.
Donald Trump on CNN. And ferocious wildfires flashing through the Northwest now take a human toll. 3 firefighters were killed near the town of Twisp in north central Washington state on Wednesday. The National Forest Service says the firefighters' vehicle crashed and that the flames apparently caught up with them. At least 3 more were injured, 1 critically. It's unclear if they were in the same vehicle. The firefighters died after people in Twisp were told to evacuate.
I've just been watching the fire, you know, from just kind of hopscotching these ridges and working towards our house. That's why I came back up here, was to grab stuff and, you know, in case it came all the way over the top.
Washington Governor Jay Inslee is requesting a federal emergency declaration to pay for more help fighting the fires tearing through the state. A fire covering about 50 square miles is threatening the town of Conconully, more than 100 miles north of Seattle.
It went over the top of the hill and came down to the bottom of the hill and burned down.
About 200 people were ordered to evacuate.
Pretty much every road up here was blocked with traffic because all the campers, people were trying to get out, but the road below us was closed.
At least 1 farmer was seen herding about 200 cattle from Conconully down a main road to safety. 29,000 firefighters are battling around 100 fires in states including Washington, California, Oregon, and Idaho. Meanwhile, ISIS terrorists claim responsibility for a massive car bomb that exploded in Cairo. That blast demolished a national security building. It left gaping holes in the building. At least 29 people are wounded, including police and soldiers, but there are no immediate reports of deaths. Thailand's military believes at least 10 people were involved in this week's bombing at a popular shrine. They don't suspect it was carried out by international terrorists. Police are still looking for the man seen in a video placing a backpack at the shrine minutes before the blast. The explosion killed 20 people and injured more than 100. Days after the anniversary of the death of Michael Brown, another fatal police shooting prompts more protests in St. Louis. The latest shooting also involved a black teen, but unlike Brown in nearby Ferguson, police say this young man was armed. Police arrested at least 9 people after firing tear gas at demonstrators who were throwing bottles and bricks. The demonstration just one of several after the killing of 18-year-old Mansour Bolbe. Police say the suspect pulled a gun on them as they chased him from a house where a search warrant was being served. 3 Florida Planned Parenthood clinics resumed performing first trimester abortions despite an ongoing state investigation. Florida Governor Rick Scott recently launched a statewide investigation of the abortion provider. That probe revealed 3 clinics were illegally performing second trimester abortions. Planned Parenthood claims the state suddenly changed its legal definition of trimester. Other states are also investigating Planned Parenthood, this all since the release of revealing undercover videos. We have Lila Rose, president of Live Action, with us, a media group dedicated to ending abortion. So what's the status of these other investigations?
So there's 13 states now that have opened investigations into Planned Parenthood. The status is ongoing. We have a lot to hear now from the states of the different illegal activities that they may be uncovering or the regulations that are not being followed, like in the state of Florida, committing second trimester abortions when those are actually illegal in the state. And then you also have at the congressional federal level, Energy and Commerce Committee and others who have opened investigations into the abortion giant. Investigations are good, Brian, but it's time to see some prosecution as well and actually ongoing criminal prosecution because of all of the illegal activities that have been taking place.
And Rick Santorum just called for that prosecution and shutting down Planned Parenthood. The latest video, we have a witness that says the heart of the baby was beating. And so doesn't that really add up to murder?
I know. It's infanticide, where you actually have Planned Parenthood in their own facility, and actually the facility from the eyewitness, the former STEM Express employee, was in my hometown of San Jose, and in that abortion clinic where they go and commit abortions past 20, up to 20 weeks, she talks about the baby's heart beating. This little boy that had been aborted, this boy, child, maybe 20 weeks or more, and then how she's told to carve the face with a scissors to extract the brain, to harvest the brain and sell it. I mean, this video and these videos are heart-wrenching, but keep in mind that there are over 3,000 children a day now being killed legally, and illegally as well, body parts are being sold of many of those children, and it continues to happen, even as these videos surface. So we have to be vigilant in getting this out and demanding congressional action, state action, demanding authorities to take action and prosecute, because we have to stop the killing.
Of course, the latest video is the 7th in a row. Are you concerned that, you know, these are kind of getting passé because there's so many of them and people won't pay attention anymore?
I think it's a test of the moral fiber of this country, and it's an opportunity, it's a clarion call for us to say, who are we as Americans? What are we going to accept? What are we going to reject? If we are truly a country that is okay with videos emerging that prove what's happening in the facilities in our neighborhoods, that show how we're killing children up past the 2nd trimester and then selling their heart, their lungs, their liver, their brains, their body parts, and we look away and we're okay with that, Lord have mercy on this country. But I believe people are becoming outraged, people are getting stirred in their hearts and their heads, and we're going to see a lot more change happening politically and culturally.
Of course, all abortion is murder. However, we're talking legal definitions here, and hopefully this will get something going in the legal area. Lila Rose with Live Action, we always appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up, Britain and France try to slow the flow of migrants across the English Channel. And a UN aid agency calls for international cooperation in placing refugees. Today, August 20th, is the feast of St. Bernard of Clairvaux, abbot, confessor, and doctor of the church. He gave us the beautiful Marian prayer, the Memorare. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Britain and France join forces, hoping to slow the wave of migrants trying to cross the English Channel. Officials announced more security guards, surveillance cameras, and infrared technology will be used to secure the Channel Tunnel. The measures include more aggressive policing of human traffickers and millions of dollars to help asylum seekers. Britain and France have accused each other of failing to manage the crowds of migrants who are trying to cross through the tunnel. Meanwhile, hundreds of migrants from Syria leave the Greek port of Piraeus. Some are believed to be going to Athens. It's been a long journey for a Syrian woman who stops in Lebanon and Turkey before arriving in Greece.
We hope to find a better future for our kids, for our children.
What is the situation in Syria right now?
Oh, it's too bad. It's too bad. It's terrible. It's miserable. And no words can express the reality in Syria now.
The vast majority of migrants do want to stay in Greece, or don't want to stay there with its high unemployment. Hamza hopes to eventually go to Germany. She has family there. Joining us from Rome, Barbara Molinario from the United Nations Refugee Agency. She works with the Mediterranean nations, including Greece and Italy. And tell us, Barbara, what the difference is between refugees and migrants, and are these people who are coming in considered one or the other?
Well, refugees are people that are fleeing from war and persecution or discrimination and that are outside their country. The main difference is that they're not voluntarily choosing to leave their countries in search of a better life, but they're forced to abandon their homes and forced to leave their country. And the situation in the Mediterranean is overwhelmingly a refugee crisis because refugees are Syrians. In fact, Syrians escaping the war are the main nationality of people that is arriving by sea in Europe this year. In fact, this year, there is an unprecedented refugee crisis in the world. There's now over 60 million people that have been forced from their homes due to violence and war. And it's the highest number since the Second World War.
And so what are the specific fears that Europeans are expressing in light of this situation?
Well, Europeans are generally expressing a lot of solidarity towards refugees. We see this in local communities. We see this in terms of government response. We see this in terms of the massive efforts on the part of the Italian government in search and rescue and the Greek government in trying to address the situation. Of course, there's also some fear, especially when this situation is portrayed only by giving numbers and talking about the volume of people that are arriving rather than explaining the fact that, in fact, they are people fleeing from war and persecution and that they're here only to look for safety and they're not a threat.
And you have personal experience working in places where they actually arrive, don't you?
I do. I've been working with UNHCR in Italy for the last 7 years, and the first 4 of these I was actually working at landings, at receiving people that are coming by sea and informing them on their rights and on the procedures to follow in order to seek asylum.
And very briefly, how can the international community help with this crisis?
Well, there's 2 main things that the international community can do. The first is that to ask their governments to take in more refugees, especially through resettlement schemes. That is, taking them in from transit countries so that they are not forced to risk their lives on a boat in order to reach safety. And then, of course, what we can do is support the countries that are hosting more refugees, because it is very important to remember that 86% of refugees in the world are not, in fact, in industrial countries, but they're in the developing countries.
All right, Barbara Molinaro joining us from Rome. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Up next, Jeb Bush takes a poke at inconsistent stands taken by Republican frontrunner Donald Trump. And these maimed albino kids from Tanzania begin new lives with donated prosthetic limbs from U.S. charities. We adore you, Jesus, in the most blessed sacrament of the altar, in remembrance of Holy Thursday on this Thursday devoted to the Holy Eucharist. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and this is EWTN News Nightly. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush takes on GOP frontrunner Donald Trump in making his case to conservative voters today.
Why don't we support, and this is going to be my pitch, let's support someone who you don't have to guess where he stands because he's consistent. Because he's been governor and he consistently has the views that he has. And over time, I think people are going to want someone sitting behind the big desk that they know their compass points north, that they have the integrity to act on what they say they'll do, and they have the leadership skills to make it so. That's it.
Bush's comments came at a town hall in Merrimack, New Hampshire yesterday. Frank Cannon is president of American Principles in Action. That's a group that promotes social conservative thought. You've worked on campaigns. What's it going to take for one of these candidates to break out of the pack?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is broken out of the pack because he is speaking to a concern that average voters have that the system doesn't work anymore. And I think that rather than focusing on resume, people talking about how they're going to change the system to work on behalf of average Americans and to not be business as usual is the key to somebody doing well in the Republican primaries.
Some question Trump whether he is a true conservative. How would you define true conservative, and is he?
Well, I think if you look at his past positions, he's been all over the lot and certainly not a conservative on many positions. But I think he has, for the sake of this campaign, taken on conservative positions. But I think that that's the wrong prism to look at this through. I think the prism is, does the government work for average citizens? And when the government doesn't work for average citizens, people are looking not so much for the kind of consistency that Jeb Bush pointed to, but to somebody who will shake the system up and make it work again on behalf of average Americans.
Trump has such an abrasive personality. Can that be overcome in terms of voter appeal?
Well, the interesting thing is that 60% of voters have a positive image of Trump after all of the various controversies. Now, I would agree that in normal times, the things that Trump has said already would be disqualifying. But apparently voters don't think that way. They're looking for somebody to take on business as usual, and they assume that comes with a little bit of give and take and a little bit of aggression. And they're willing to give him the break, at least for now.
I want to switch gears. You were part of the Bush faith-based initiative. Where is faith in this campaign among the Republican field?
Well, I think faith plays a very important part in every election. I think that it is, we're at a time where simply espousing your faith and telling people you have a strong faith is not enough. I think that faith is seriously under attack, particularly given the latest rulings by the Supreme Court. I think what's important is that faith within the public square be defended. And I think that candidates who step up and defend the idea, for example, that the Catholic Church teaches that homosexual behavior is disordered, are willing to say that that doesn't take Catholic politicians, Catholic institutions, and move them out of the public square. I think that faith is important as a First Amendment right and needs to be defended within the public square.
And faith takes courage. It's not necessarily just a political ploy to get elected.
Exactly.
Interesting discussion. We'll have more of these with you. Frank Cannon with American Principles in Action. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, because of ancient superstition, many albinos are butchered, even murdered in Eastern Africa. Catherine Zeltner reports on 5 traumatized albino kids from Tanzania who are finding relief here in the U.S.
5-year-old Baraka loves to dance. When his feet begin to move, a smile comes across his face. But young Baraka's smile hides a terrible pain. I was terrified. That's why I started to cry, he says. In Baraka's home country of Tanzania and other parts of East Africa, attacks on albinos have spiked this year, forcing many to live in safe houses. Witch doctors believe their body parts are good luck and use them to make potions. While the government has banned witch doctors, it hasn't stopped the butchering and killing. They cut off the hand, Baraka says. Others, none of them were hacked. And then my mom, they hit her in the head, and they come to me with machetes. From 8,000 miles away, Alyssa Montanti heard Baraka's story.
I just knew that I had to get to him and offer whatever we can, whatever kind of help we could to this boy.
Montanti runs the Global Medical Relief Fund from her New York home. She helps children from crisis zones around the world to get custom prosthesis in the U.S., which is how Baraka and 4 other Tanzanian children made it to the U.S. this summer. It took just 3 hacks for attackers to cut off 17-year-old Kabula's right arm.
I feel bad because I still don't know what they did with my arm, where it is, what benefits they derived from it, or whether they were able to somehow use it or if they simply dumped it.
Philadelphia's Shriners Hospital is making custom prosthesis for each child, and they'll be back as they grow to get new ones.
They're not getting their arm back, but what they are getting is something that's going to help them lead a productive life and to be part of society and not be looked upon that, you know, they're a freak or there's, you know, they're not whole.
Once they get their new limbs in September, the children will return to their safe house in Tanzania. Until then, Montanti and the children are keeping busy. Their first trip to a pool, birthday parties, and of course, for little Baraka, dancing. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. God help those children, and thank God there are others who are willing to help them. Until tomorrow, please like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to watch this or any other newscast again, you can do so on EWTN's YouTube page. Our EWTN News Nightly team, the #1 team. I want to thank each member of our team. I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for watching. Good night. God bless you.